You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Then she slipped through it and shut it behind her and stood with her back against it, looking about her and breathing quite fast with excitement and wonder and delight. She was standing inside the secret garden.
I am so excited what we're doing today. If you don't know what we're doing today by that quote, I mean, what kind of childhood did you really have?
Exactly.
We are doing The Secret Garden, written by Frances Burnett, who, oddly enough, this was her least popular book.
Which is crazy.
Little Princess was like a way more popular book. Even when she died, 1920-something.
Yeah.
This wasn't even written in her obituary because it was such a non sequitur. But this is a huge part of my childhood. How about yours?
Same.
Like, massive. I think this book saved me. I probably read this book 25 times. I was obsessed.
Yeah, I feel like it's a definite, like, as a little girl growing up, this is like one of those books that, as far as I know, every little girl was either read or you read this book growing up.
I also feel like it's the gateway drug to being an escapism child. I was 100% an escapism child. I was going through some really bad stuff. I used fantasy and books to escape. And this one was real life, right? Like, it wasn't fantasy, but it allowed you to, like, fantasize about this garden.
I mean, if we're being totally honest, it's kind of like an intro to fantasy.
Absolutely.
Like the world of fantasy, because it has such... The author of this book, as well as like Little Princess, she writes so beautifully and so descriptively that you feel like you are completely immersed in the world that she is creating. And obviously this book has Secret Garden in it. And it is such an incredible, like, adventure book.
Oh, it's like the female adventure book. It really
is.
Really, really. I mean, before we get into that, let's just talk about the part I was most excited for.
Yeah.
So when I was thinking about cocktails for this book, there's so many ways in the cocktail world that I could have done this that would have a bajillion ingredients, that would have some really beautiful floral notes, had a beautiful color, but I wanted it to be vibrant and I wanted it to be something that was simple yet beautiful, which is exactly what the garden was, right?
Yeah.
So I just called it The Secret Garden because what else are you going to call it?
Exactly.
It's so perfect. And it's something that you could do at home very quickly. You just get rosé wine, blend it up with some fresh strawberries. And if you can find a strawberry liqueur, there's some really bad ones out there and there's some really good ones.
Yeah. Find the right one.
It makes like a really beautiful pink color, and you just blend them up and with some ice cubes and make it a frozen cocktail. And then on top, just put it in like a nice cool glass, or like a glass that is going to look really pretty when you do it, because if you just put a bunch of little edible flowers in it, it's so pretty. And that just, to me, is one of the things that I think about when I think about this book is the way they described the garden and the colors of those flowers. And it was fantastical. So I wanted a cocktail that would look fantastical. And it is delicious. We're not drinking it today. We are drinking, but we are not drinking it today.
Yeah, but cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
So just a little bit about the book, right?
Yeah.
Do you know when it was written?
Yeah, it was published in 1911, which is kind of crazy.
Bananas.
Like
bananas.
And we're talking about it in 2024. Like, that's wild. That reach. And it's still, to be fair, not everything aged super well. But it's still such a beautifully written book. And I think it's one of those books that stays with you. Like, because I read it at such a young age, rereading it as an adult, it still had that very like special, magical feeling when I was reading it as an adult.
100%. So do you remember how we cried reading Bridge to Terabithia? This was my other Bridge to Terabithia. And like, I think I would read them in tandem. Finish this one, I'd read Chronicles of Narnia, and I would read A Wrinkle in Time, and I would read this one. And
I love it.
It is one of those books that I had not revisited in so long. Like, I'm not kidding, like decades, probably 20 years. I had not read this book.
Yeah.
My God, did I cry?
It's, you know what?
I cried so hard.
Yeah. And it's a very real book. There's no like tiptoeing around really big emotions and things that are happening and things that were happening in the world of the story.
Yeah. That's one of the things that didn't age well, right? Like
exactly.
Her parents were British colonizers who lived in India and, you know, had Indian people as their servants, which we now know was basically slavery.
Yeah.
And in the book, everybody dies of cholera, right?
Yeah.
And she's an orphan.
Yeah.
And the way that they write it in the book is quite sad. She's all by herself. But I think it also explores being a little girl and having to prescribe to this notion that you should be sweet and kind and soft and don't have big opinions and don't be disagreeable. You need to be likable and cute and clean and demure. So demure, so mindful.
Yeah.
And Mary was none of those.
Yeah. In fact, she's kind of known as the most disagreeable child that ever was. And which is kind of like a terrible way.
Horrible thing to call a child.
But what's interesting about the story is it really it introduces this kind of like this storyline where there's this little girl, she's living with her parents in India, and she's struggling with the fact that like her mother does not like her. She wants nothing to do with her. Her father's not even really, he's not really mentioned a ton.
In the book, he is not a main character.
No.
For sure, no.
And definitely focusing on the fact that the mother wants nothing to do with the daughter.
And wants to party, right? So that's the other thing. They're very wealthy because they're British colonizers in India. So they throw these lavish parties with all of these wild animals, right? Like they talk about, was it a lion or a tiger? And like you see elephants. And this little girl, because she's been raised by nannies.
Her ayahs.
Doesn't know how to dress herself.
Nope. She doesn't do anything.
She doesn't do anything.
No.
What would you like to wear? Black. Black. Oh, black.
Are you blind?
They're all black. And I won't be laughed at. Servant.
You learn very quickly that like you kind of don't like her in the beginning, but then the empathy kicks in and you really feel bad for this child.
Well, and there's this little bit of foreshadowing happening in the beginning too, where she's telling herself these stories of the princess and
sad.
And like it's crazy how much that resonates through the story. And like you realize very quickly, like, oh, that's it's her. Like this is her story. And she's kind of living this very like no one understands her. So she is taken on like what people say about her as this very disagreeable child. Literally like the Mary, quite contrary is like what everyone calls her.
Yes.
And as she becomes an orphan because she loses both of her parents, she then goes on this journey to her only living relative, which is her uncle, who is going to take her in. And it's a very like sad and like you very quickly like you don't want to like her, but yet you feel so bad for her.
Sure. Everyone's calling her ugly, like straight to her face, like you're an ugly kid, aren't you?
Yeah. And she's alone and she knows she's alone and she knows she's not liked. And like she battles with the fact that no one likes her. And like that's just who she is. Like I'm just going to be this person.
Sure. And that was almost the title of the book. Mistress Mary was almost the title of the book. And she ended up changing it to Secret Garden.
Yeah.
Because Mistress Mary just has different connotations, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have that fantastical nature. You kind of go in thinking you're getting a book about adults.
Yeah. And then it's not so
Heartbreaking.
much. Well, I like that you brought that up because before we dive any deeper into the story, I found this really interesting. So Frances, the author, she lost her dad at a really young age.
Mhm.
And so she was brought up by her grandmother because her mother took over running her family's business, which is kind of interesting.
Pretty badass for that time.
Exactly. But I would assume that the mother was not involved. So a similar feel to the story of Little Mary. And what was even more interesting is they end up moving to Knoxville, Tennessee, and she meets a boy named Swan Bennett.
Oh.
And he was left crippled after a childhood injury, which is interesting. That kind of plays into our story as well. But she ends up marrying this guy. And all of her stories started out as like short stories. She just loved writing short stories. And a lot of her short stories were published in Peterson's Magazine and then Harper's Bazaar, which was like
crazy.
Whoa. Like kind of incredible for the time.
And a
woman.
female author.
Exactly. And she, obviously she marries this man, but then she also goes on to write plays that are on Broadway, which is insane. And then she eventually writes The Secret Garden and Little Princess and stuff like that.
Her life is so interesting. And also they say that she based Colin off of her son who passed.
Yes.
Her son died when he was an 1890 or 16-year-old son. Lionel died from tuberculosis.
Which is really devastating.
So devastating. And she said that she disagreed with this, which also could just be a mother's grief, right?
Yeah.
She said that Colin's nothing like her son, and she wasn't idealizing the version of like, oh, I'm a mother who lost my son. But she said that, you know, the writer's tougher than the woman. And the person that I wrote in these stories sure has influence on.
Of course.
And maybe she doesn't want to admit that stuff. You know, like that's, I mean, these books are written like hundreds of years ago. But
and women don't talk about that.
Absolutely.
You know,
just
like
bottle it down.
I mean, like when you're having children during that time, like the husband's not even with you when you're giving birth. You know, like you just don't talk about
Oh my
stuff.
God. I just saw a joke the other day about, I think it was SNL. And I don't remember what it was, but it was like, you don't, back in the day, Catholic families, like I grew up Catholic.
Yeah.
You had 12 kids.
Yeah.
Because 6 of them were going to die.
Yes.
So you had 6 left over. So it was just like, meh.
The plan was that if 6 of them died, you still had 6.
Yeah, I think it was John Mulaney was talking about
Yes,
Yeah, and he was saying like, your kid had a cough, so you put a towel on its head, and then when it went into its room and had the towel on its head, you'd say to your husband, we should probably have another kid. This kid's, you know, this one's about to die from cough with towel. So back then, like women were so used to losing children and also dying in childbirth, which that just kind of proves to Colin's point.
Yeah.
He was told that he killed his mother.
Yeah.
Which we learn is not the case, right?
Okay, so we can kind of dive into this. So the story is poor little Mary becomes an orphan. She goes to live with her uncle. And obviously, she meets some fun characters when she gets to this house. She kind of befriends the gardener, but he wants really nothing to do with her. But I
really love his character.
I know, I do too. And she's so lonely, and she's kind of a broken little child.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of symbolism in this story because she's very broken, alone. It's a very dark and gray world that she's living in. And eventually she finds, you know, this said garden. She finds a key. She befriends a robin. There's like a whole thing, right? We know this. If you read the story, you know the story. But she discovers the secret garden. She goes into the secret garden, and it's it's been years since anyone's been in there, but clearly someone's been kind of like taking care of it a little bit. But also it kind of foreshadows the fact that like as she starts to figure out who she is, the garden starts to bloom and
respond
grow
to that.
And respond. Yeah. And there's like a magic. There's not a lot of, I wouldn't say there's a lot of make-believe magic. It's like real world magic where like the fact that like a garden in the, like the end of winter and the beginning of spring and stuff.
English countryside.
It feels so
alive.
like dead and stuff. And and the author also, it was said that she kind of was inspired by the gardens of Mayhem Hall, which are in England.
Yeah.
And so like you can get that visual, these like stunning, stunning gardens. But I loved the fact that as she starts to discover who she is and explore the area, she also is watching the garden grow. And in that process, she meets, for like the first night she's there, or the first morning she's there, she meets the she's like one of the help. Like
she's like a scullery maid who's like kind of assigned to her, Martha.
Yeah.
Who's just like,
she's an incredible character. Maybe one of my
favorites. Yeah. Between her and Dickon.
Yes.
Who's her younger brother.
Yeah.
Who can speak to animals and communicates with animals. Yeah. They have this wonderful mother who's so wise beyond her years, who just...
She loves her children very well, and she does a really good job of letting them be who they are. Yeah. And like, she's a very honest and kind of like blunt woman of the time because she speaks her mind.
She's not mincing words.
To anybody.
Absolutely not. To the uncle who's very wealthy and like known as this big curmudgeon who nobody likes because he's dealing with the grief of losing his wife.
Right. Which, again, is another. His wife was the sister of Mary's mother.
Twin sister.
Which, this kind of leads me to, okay, we're going to talk about the movie, which the movie that I knew was the movie that was, I think it was 1993. 93. Okay.
So there's been a few, though.
There's been a lot.
So the book entered public domain in 1987, which allowed people to do whatever the heck they wanted with it.
Yeah.
But there's 4 distinct film versions of the novel. One was made in 1919 while Frances Hodgson Burnett was alive. The second was made in 1949 by MGM, which was like the biggest studio in the world.
Wait, did you see that there was one? What was the first one that you said?
1919.
Okay. And that is believed to be lost. Like they don't know what happened to that.
Yeah, because I don't even know that one.
Yeah.
And then you've got the 1993, which was made by American Zoetrope, and the 4th version, which was made by Heyday Films and came out in 2020. Also, there is a made-for-TV series.
BBC.
Which I watched a couple episodes of, and very true to the book, I thought. Like we all have learned this, right? BBC, they take a book, they turn it into a series.
Yes.
They're not afraid of doing limited series.
Nope.
And they'll give you every damn detail.
Also, there was one more.
Oh, I don't know one more.
Which I was like, oh, this is incredible. So we're totally jumping ahead, but I was like, I have to see this now. Hallmark did their own version, except they changed things.
Oh.
So it's Hallmark Hall of Fame filmed a TV movie adaptation, and the story was changed slightly. Colin's father, instead of being Mary's uncle, is an old friend of Mary's father, allowing Colin and Mary to begin a relationship as adults.
Oh, there it is. There's the lifetime. There it is.
And even cooler, the film was shot at Highclere Castle, which obviously, if anyone has ever watched Downton Abbey, it was filmed there.
Well,
so shout out.
Now I just want to watch that.
I know. And it's called, was called, I'm not sure that this is the right title. It's either they made a sequel to this movie or this is the movie's title, but it's called Back to Secret Garden.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if it was that
makes sense that it would be because they're adults falling in love.
Yes. Okay. So I think it is.
So that makes sense.
I think it is. Yeah.
Also, they did a musical, of course.
Yep. And an animated series.
Oh. Now, that's funny you say that because I kept seeing, when I was pulling up my notes for this episode, I kept seeing like clips And I was like, wow, they're all using the same art. This artist must have really just captured it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So in
animated series.
1994, it was an ABC weekend special, and it was an animated special.
So did you see the 1948 version? Because I saw it in school. They showed it to us in school.
I probably did, but I don't remember.
Yeah, and it didn't stick with me. But the 1993 version with our girl, Dame Maggie Smith.
Can we talk the little beret hat and jacket?
Okay, this is peak fashion. I remember watching that and being like, that is the it girl outfit.
Yes.
I wanted that little navy pea coat.
Yes.
And that little red beret.
Yes.
So with the tights and the little Mary Janes, to me, that was Vogue when I was 8, 9 years old. Like that, to me, you could not tell me that was not
so classy.
Pinnacle of fashion.
Agreed.
And did you go see that in the theater? I did.
No.
I did with a friend and her family. And I was in second grade. Came out in 93, so I was in second grade. And I remember just staring at that screen and being like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's wealth.
That's who
That is class, baby. I also had a Marlboro mom. So it's like, to me, anything was going to be class. But
fantastic.
They changed some things in that one. Like straight up, the parents die in a very different way. They die in an earthquake.
Yeah.
There's some differences, but it is quite true to the book.
Yeah, and it follows the it's interesting. I don't know who wrote the screenplay, but there are a lot of word for word quotes, like book to movie.
And I really think they did a great job of showing the little actors that they had playing the kids really did showcase. So we had Kate Maberly, who played Mary Lennox, and Hayden Prowse played Colin Craven. And then you had Andrew Knott, who played Dickon. And
I had a huge crush on him.
Yo, he was hot.
Like,
he was so cute. And he grew up to even continue to be hot.
His little character at the very end when he like gets on his little pony.
So cute.
Irish king.
I mean, also we talked to animals. Like, what more could I want? Are you kidding me?
He's so sweet.
I think too, though, that they did a really good job of the garden in that version is the garden in the book to me.
100%.
Like, that is how it looked in my head.
Yes.
And it was just like, very emotional child. I remember like watching the garden come to life at home when it would like hit TV and I was watching with my little sister.
Yeah.
And like getting emotional because it was like so beautiful and magical and oddly reminded me of the Jungle Book.
It does have a Jungle Book
like the
feel.
Jungle Book
Yeah.
animated movie. I don't know if I put it together then, but like I remember thinking pre-adolescent that like the Secret Garden Jungle Book had like the same vibe. Like if I were to paint that version in my head, it would be that.
I wonder if it has a little bit like because it's an India feel.
Sure. Absolutely. And there's also just to, talk about that movie, you can't deny that, sure, it's the 90s, right?
Yeah.
They did the best with what they had. But it is they capture her relationship with Colin, who is her cousin. So just to backtrack a little bit, his mother has passed. His dad is a hunchback, doesn't want anyone to look at him. So he's a little bit of a recluse, travels all the time because he doesn't want to be around people, just goes on these solo travel adventures.
Or
doesn't want to be around his son because he thinks his son's going to have a hunchback. He thinks he's going to kill his son. And so he kind of does little Munchausen's by proxy, like makes his son think he's going to die.
Yeah.
Mary stumbles upon her cousin because she hears them wailing at night and eventually convinces him, like, you're not going to die.
Yeah.
Like, you're just you're letting yourself die.
Well, and the innocence of a child not understanding, like, adults being so concerned and, like, all this, like, real stuff. But in reality, like, they've put on him what happened to his mother, which...
They're almost forcing him into thinking it's going to happen. And this is so interesting. Burnett admired Mary Baker Eddy's Christian Science teachings, which include the rejection of medicine in favor of prayer and positive thinking. All of those beliefs made it into the Secret Garden.
Yeah.
So Colin, who's very sickly and locked away in the mansion, and in the novel can be read as a feminist Christian Science revision of it, but rest is the cure. Bed rest, social isolation, like force feeding him. That's what's going to do more for him. The doctors do more harm than good.
Right.
right? All this boy needs is some sunlight and some love and some positive thinking.
Mhm.
And every doctor that comes in, because you do get this doctor who's like a family cousin.
Yeah, he's
or
like
something.
some
sort of relation that if Colin dies,
Yeah.
actually does die,
Yeah.
he inherits the manor.
And you almost think that like he's going to be kind of the villain, but he's really not. He's very much just a man who, thinks he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't know what's best for Colin in this aspect. But like once he realizes that he's actually doing better when Mary starts taking him out, like you can see the change in him. Whereas
And he has these tantrums that like nobody can like calm him down except for Mary. It's kind of like, chill out, bro.
She just
like, what
throws,
are you doing?
she kind of like throws at him what he does to everybody else.
Sure.
Like she just gets louder. She just screams at him like, why are you being like this? You're being a brat.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
And I also loved the fact that you don't get it a ton in the book. Like you never really hear much about the two sisters, Mary's mom and then Colin's mom. But in the movie, this first movie that we're talking about, you get a tiny little bit of the history of that. Like they're sisters. They were very close. They had a lot of time together. Mary's father gets stationed somewhere else. That is why they move away from each other. And then Colin's mom gets very sick. And obviously there's a whole process. And then there's a lot of again, you don't really hear it or necessarily see it, but you kind of get like little glimpses of like why Mary's mom can't look at Mary or doesn't want to interact with Mary because she's so heartbroken.
And she looks like her sister.
She looks like her sister. Now, to bring up the newest addition to this.
So to wrap up the last one.
Yeah.
It's very book forward, right?
Yeah.
I would say the BBC show is probably most book forward.
Yes.
If you're going to pick a movie, this is
it's
next
incredible.
Best. It's beautiful. It's nostalgic.
Beautiful. It was done beautifully.
Beautifully. And to just, tie a little bow on it, I was a very like precocious child. I was very like, wanting to know what the adults were doing, very in the adult space, but also as a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And this book made me feel like if Mary can make everyone like her, I can make everybody like me.
Yeah.
And like when you're a little kid in the 90s, nobody dislikes you. It's not like 1920. But when you're reading books like this, it was so relatable to little girls everywhere. Not just me. Literally every girl read that thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I love most about what we're going to talk about, the 2020 movie, is you get a little bit more of that growth on screen. Like you don't hate Mary as much. You don't see Mary as disagreeable in this 2020 version.
Mm-hmm.
But I just to close one and open the other, the juxtaposition of like how they cast Mary and who Mary was in the 1993 version, very accurate to the book, right? Like,
fair.
She is like kind of like, oh, this little child's a little,
she's a little gangly.
She's a little tough to look at.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, you're like, oh, she's so precious.
Yeah.
In this version, she's freaking adorable right off the get.
Yeah.
Mrs. Medlock says you're cluttering up the place. She'd have me send you away to school.
I don't want that, sir. I like it here.
Then we will find you a governess.
No, I've no need of a governess.
I mean, I think like we can't compare the two because the 2020,
so different.
It's just they took a lot of creative direction.
Sure.
Away from the original book, but I have to say I I loved it. I loved the fact that you get so much of the mom story. You understand the lack of, I want to say, empathy for her daughter and the need for her daughter to be loved, and like her like pain through losing her sister in the way that she lost her sister. And when she looks at her daughter, all she sees is her sister. But the fact that she loves her so, so much, you find that out like as the movie goes on.
In the 2020 version, you get more of the father who says, your mommy loves you very much. She's just very sick. And then we learn that the mom is going through extreme grief. Yeah. Right? She has lost her twin sister. This is about as much grief as you can get. And she's lost all this time with her twin sister because they had to be stationed in India. Yeah. There's this moment in the 2020 movie where Mary, who is played by Dixie Eggerichs, she knocks over this carousel that's in her room. All these letters fall out of the carousel. And it's all the letters from her mother to her aunts whose home she's living in. Yeah. And she gets to share these moments with her cousin Colin. And your mom didn't leave you. She didn't not love you. She loved you so much and she was so scared. And my mother loved me. Yeah. And like she doesn't believe it until her cousin Colin was like, no, you have to read this letter. She talks about how proud she is of you. Yeah. And the garden is so different.
Yeah. She also, the letters, she also talks about the fact that she worries that Colin's dad will make him sick because
Munchausen's by proxy, my friends.
Right. Yeah. And like there's so much that you don't necessarily get in the book that you get from this version of the movie, but it all fits so perfectly. Like it all makes sense, and it makes sense that like this is what's going on in the book. You just don't get that.
Sure. And we also need to talk about the uncle, who is Archibald Craven, who we don't really talk about it in, okay, so just back to the book. So eventually Colin, you know, he gets better with Mary, and he does this secretly with Mary and Dickon. Yeah. And they go out into the garden, and she's like, spring's here and wonderful things grow, and like you're going to grow and you're going to be able to walk. And by the end of the book, he surprises his father by walking to him.
Stop. Okay. Can I?
No, not yet, because I'll cry. And I'm going to cry. And so the end of this, I mean, when you watch the 2020 version, right? Yeah. I love the father in the book. Archibald Craven in the book is just a man going through grief.
Yeah. He's a beautiful character.
Beautiful character.
He really is.
The 2020 movie, he's not as beloved. He's a little bit meaner. He wants to send Mary to a school. He's in his grief.
Colin Firth played
I was just going to say. And you can't like him. But then you see it's the zaddy himself. Yes. Colin Firth.
Yes, exactly.
You can't make me hate him.
Shout out Mr. Darcy.
You cannot
the original.
Give me that man.
No.
And make me hate him.
No.
Even if he has a hunchback, I don't care.
It doesn't
I'll
matter.
hold on to that thing.
Also, you're meant to hate him, but you don't.
You can't.
You don't hate him. Also, can we do a little? Who's the woman who comes and brings Mary to the house?
Oh, Mrs. Medlock.
Yeah, but who plays
Played by
her?
our girl Julie Walters. How do they keep finding these epic, like insanely incredible women? Although, let's be honest, Mrs. Medlock in the book and in the first movie eventually grows to love Mary and like be there for Mary. Yo, Mrs. Medlock in this movie, she can kick rocks. Yeah. She's a demon. Yeah. She's giving Mrs. Trunchbull vibes. She's the worst.
Yeah, she's not great.
I don't love her.
No.
But also Dickon is played by Amir Wilson, which he's just like the cutest.
Incredible.
He gave to me like that playfulness in his eyes and face 100%. That Dickon has in the book. And that, I will say, we don't really talk about it as much in the movie, but in the book and in the first movie, I love that this Robin becomes her friend, because that is almost fantastical. But in that time, they were training birds to be carrier pigeons. They were training, like, birds were very, very different than we treat them now, of course. But they just kind of get rid of that plot line, and it's a dog, which I'm always going to love if there's a dog involved.
But there's still a Robin in the story.
Yes, but it doesn't
play the same
any role.
No.
It's just there because it's like, why not?
Yeah.
And we lose our gardener altogether.
He's there, but he's not
her friend.
No,
he doesn't.
No.
In the book, he helps them create the garden.
It's kind of like it's Dickon. He's kind of like the
Sure, Dickon's taken on all the roles.
Yeah.
And Aunt Jemima, aka what's the dad's name? Hector?
Hector, yeah.
Hector. Aunt Jemima, and then becomes Hector.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not call her Aunt Jemima because while they're doing it, and she's like, I'm going to name her Jemima. And I'm like,
Yeah.
This is 2020.
Of all the
Didn't we
names.
retire that? Didn't
Yeah.
we just go backwards for
Can
that?
we maybe
Just do
work on
anything?
that? Well, we could talk to the guy who did the screenplay, who also wrote Cursed Child. So
He did also write The Cursed Child, which,
Jack.
okay, this is one thing I do want to talk about for this
Mhm,
movie.
mhm.
Why do you think they made the garden not a garden?
I mean, I think that was maybe the one thing that I was kind of like, okay,
Let's start there, though. It's freaking gorgeous. It
It's
is
stunning.
like a mystical land. And I think maybe because they leaned into the fact that in this version, the
Mhm.
garden is magic. There
Yes.
are supernatural powers
Yes.
at play. Where maybe because it does look more magical.
Yeah, I think they played up the natural magic of a garden
Yeah.
in the original movie, and then obviously the book.
But it's not even really a garden. It's
But also,
woods.
like when she first discovers it, she falls over the top of the thing, and it's like down this cliff, and you're just kind of like, I don't understand. Okay, but then also like then they just find the door and they walk through it and into the garden, and you're like,
And she's like, you need a key. And she's like, it's locked. You need a key. And she's like, not for long.
yeah.
And she unlocks it.
There's a lot of visuals. So there's a lot of stuff that happens because their spirits are so high and they're
Yes.
so excited. So the garden starts flourishing. And then there's the scene where there's like sadness and the garden starts to die. And you can clearly say, like, you can see that they're trying to make this like a very visually magical place.
Sure.
That thrives when there's love and happiness.
And they do so many callbacks, right? So many
Yes.
flashbacks.
Yeah.
And the way that they do them are really beautiful. Like everyone kind of sees that person that they're missing or loving, and that they keep getting pulled back in time,
Mhm.
but it makes you think that they're seeing it in real time. The same
Yeah.
way that Colin Firth, Big Zaddy Daddy,
Yeah.
he sees his ex-wife. She
Yeah.
leads them out of the fire through this like door. And I mean, you have these moments that
Mhm.
I loved this version.
Mhm.
It is Secret Garden adjacent.
Yeah.
It to me is like an adaptation. I think is almost too loose
Yeah.
because you lose a lot of the magic from the book,
Fair.
but they give you a different version of
They do.
magic.
They do. It had a very similar feel for me when watching this to like Bridge to Terabithia,
Absolutely.
where there's like you're seeing the magic of this
Yes,
place.
agreed,
and it's
100%.
coming to screen. And I appreciated that because I think today the people who are watching this probably didn't read the book.
Yeah, and they need the visuals.
And they need the visuals. And I think it gives you, I think as a standalone, it's beautiful. I don't think if you're coming from reading the book and going right to that version, it's not going to give you what the book gives you. I don't think
I hope
it allows.
it inspires people to read it, though.
I think sometimes what I worry about is like you need to leave a little bit to the imagination so that you can grow your imagination. And so when
Mhm.
you're reading a book, it's kind of up to you to
Well, you create your worlds. I mean, we've talked
Right.
like that's the whole reason why this book saved me when I was a little kid.
yeah,
It allowed me to escape to a world that I created in my head
exactly.
using her beautifully written words, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a great point.
And I think that's something that like that's maybe the only thing that I was like, I really loved the movie.
Oh my
Like,
God, I loved it so much. I watched it 3 times.
the soundtrack, like everything about it was beautiful.
Wait, we didn't even admit this. Okay, we have to admit this. We, have to we must come clean.
It's okay.
We didn't know this existed, guys. We were so excited to do this one. And spoiler alert, we are going to do Little Princess because we love this kind of, young child thing.
The
Dayelle
vibe.
text messaged me and she said, hold the freaking phone. Did you know that they made a brand new movie?
Yeah.
I was like, the one in 93?
Yeah.
She was like, no, 2020, which also, what a beautiful time for this to come out. April 15th, 2020.
Yeah.
The world was in shit.
Well, and I also wonder if that's why we didn't know about it.
That's very fair. That's very fair. That's
Like,
very fair.
Everything was just chaos, and it really like I don't know. It brought me back to like a place of just like I don't know, like reminiscent of when I first read the book. Like it just
Agree
had this
100%.
beautiful. I don't know. You have to watch it.
You have to watch it. And if you're curious and you're like, I'm not going to like it, I'm going to tell you that just like put aside your pre-existing notions about the fact that this is different than the book.
Yeah.
But this is, for maybe the first time on the show, we're going to admit, it's not a bad thing.
No.
They've modernized it in a way that a younger generation can attach themselves to the story without relying on the history. There's so much history in the book because it was written in a time that history was occurring. So I think it modernized it in a way that would attach to younger audiences and also gave the, us lame ass millennials that are obsessed with this book another version to be excited about. But it did give me that same feeling of like, oh my God, I wish I could describe to people what books like this when I was younger mean to me. Like just that warm hug, that safe shelter from the storm, that place that you could escape to when everything was just freaking terrifying when you're that age, especially if you're going through bad things at that time in your life. We didn't have the words to describe our feelings then. We were too young to understand these big emotions, and this book helps you work through big emotions.
Because you're working through it with the main character.
Yeah. And the side characters.
Exactly.
I love it so much.
It definitely, I was pleasantly, a lot of times when I stumble on like new versions of books.
God, we're so nervous.
To movie or show, I'm always like, oh, is it gonna be? But I was really impressed, and I liked what they added to the stories, like the fact that they, kept a lot of the same elements, but obviously they made it more, it grew with the time.
Agreed. And they also, you don't get a version in the book or the 1993 version where Mary's mother loved her. No. She's always a nuisance child. And that was of the times, right? A lot of wealthy women didn't raise their kids. The nannies did. And in this version, you get to learn a little bit about what it's like for an adult. Just because somebody's, an adult age-wise does not mean that they have their crap together. And this woman was very ill.
Yeah.
And that relationship that she had, that beautiful relationship with her father, because in the book she doesn't. So I think it was important for them to show that she was loved.
Yeah.
And like, I love that they revisit that, like somebody going through grief and depression and just not being able to be a mom when she wants to be a mom, but she's going through this insane bouts of grief and depression. Like,
well, and I also wonder, like, bringing it back to the author, losing your dad at such a young age and then having your mom kind of leave to go take care of the family business and being brought in by your grandmother. Like, I can only imagine all of the emotions that you're going through, because there's got to be
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And
the loneliness.
So lonely. And she's an only child. And you get this a lot from both of the child characters, Colin and Mary. They think it's their fault.
Yeah.
What did I do wrong? Was I such a disagreeable child that my mother didn't love me?
Yeah.
And I think it's important for younger people watching this to know that, like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And that I'm glad that they kind of tied up those bows and tied up those loose ends, which you don't get that in the other versions.
I also, as we're talking about this, it made me think of a scene in the movie, in the 1990 movie, when Craven is away, and it's when they're all in the garden.
Yeah.
And he's dreaming. And he wakes up from the dream and knows that he has to go home.
Yeah. He's got to go.
And I was like, I'm getting like teary-eyed. That moment of like, as a child, reading the story.
Oh, you're going to make me cry. Make me cry.
Where like, that's all they want. They want the person that they love
the very most
to just come back, come to them,
be with them. Yeah.
And it's a moment where like he gets back to the house and he can't find his son, and he's so concerned. He's like, where is he? He's not in his bed. He goes looking for him, and he finds him playing in the garden.
Oh my God. I can't even deal with it. And they kind of do it in the 2020 version where he goes to him after the fire and she gets him out of the fire.
Random thing.
The fuck? And then, so she goes to him after the fire and then he goes to go to him and Colin says, wait. Yeah. And he gets up and he walks to him. And I'll be honest, it's very sweet, okay? But in the book,
it's so
I
much
cannot even talk about it. And the way that she ends that book, I text you right after I finished reading it. Yeah. I'm a freaking mess. This poor sweet baby is walking. You can read your quote now. You can read your quote since we're crying. Oh my gosh, look at our teleprompter.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can read it, but I'm gonna read it. Okay, so this is like literally the last line. Okay. Across the lawn came Master of Misselwath, and he looked as many of them had never seen him. And by his side, with his head up in the air and his eyes full of laughter, walked as strongly and steadily as any boy in... Okay. I don't know if I can do this.
You got this. It's Bridget Terabithia all over again.
I don't know if I can do it.
You can do it.
All right.
Walk as strongly as steadily.
Walked as strongly and steadily as any boy in Yorkshire, Master Colin.
He walks.
And like in the movie, it's the film where everyone's at the window and Martha runs and gets everyone. She's like, come and look. And you see Mary coming with Master with her.
Yeah.
And you see Colin and he's just running.
I cannot. His little legs. His little legs.
And I don't know, like it literally, like I could not read this book without bawling at that last line. And then you watch the movie, same thing. And then even the 2020 version, I know it's totally not the same, but like it's everything. And I also think back to like when he goes into the garden and Colin is blindfolded, so he doesn't know that his dad is the one that is standing in front of him, and his dad gets down on his knees and Colin touches his face.
His little face with his little hand. Oh my God.
And it is just, it's beautiful. And
do you know what it reminds me of? My Girl. He can't see without his glasses. That's what it reminds me of. It's just like so heartbreakingly adorable. I mean, like, this is a very easy one for me.
Oh my gosh.
This is a both. If we're going to say watch it or read it, it's a both. But you have to read it.
100%. And I would read it first.
100%. And if you've done neither and you're like, oh my God, this has like been like in a book my mom bought me for like 30 years.
Yeah.
Also, I will say I did listen to the audiobook because I want to read it again.
Yeah.
It was lovely.
It was
lovely.
Agreed.
It just added like a different. I was like, I've already read it 5,000 times. Let me listen to the audiobook.
Yeah.
I think I cried harder listening in the car. Mm-hmm. But I do just want to implore everybody, if you're a parent or an aunt or a nanny or a teacher and you have young adolescent girls, I think this is even boys, it's a really beautiful, like you said, it's an adventure book. It's a coming of age story. It's about being kind to people that are different. It's about understanding grief. And it's about using your imagination in a world where eventually it becomes not cool to use your imagination anymore.
100%.
So, I'm saying both.
I'm going to say both. And I'm also going to say I would also watch the 2020, but I would do the first, like read it.
Order, for sure.
Watch the original.
1993, BBC,
and
2020.
We'll get back to you on the Hallmark.
We'll have to live stream that.
Yeah, I think we should.
I think we should.
That would be a good one.
All right. This was so fun and so nostalgic, and we cried again.
Seems to be a theme. We need to have tissues in here.
I know. Anytime we're doing a book that's like from our childhood in some sort of way, just expect waterworks.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Our editor is Katie Yonner. Our associate producer is Grace Heerman. Our production coordinator is Nicole Vargas, and our senior content producer is Kyle Bosch. Our executive producer is Tommy West, and Watch It or Read It is produced by Gotham West Studios.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.